No, thank you. I'm going to call to order the Planning Commission meeting for December 9th, 2014. Kirsten, can we have a roll call?
Chair Simpson,
Here.
Vice Chair Kopfer is absent. Commissioner Clifford,
Here.
Commissioner Griffin,
Here.
Commissioner Walker,
Here.
and Commissioners Robinson and Cook are absent.
All right, we have on our consent agenda 4 sets of minutes. Are there any corrections or additions? May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I have a question, actually.
Oh, okay.
Would I be abstaining if I was absent at one of those meetings? What would be the proper thing to do for that? Since I couldn't confirm or deny what was said.
Which one was that?
Well, there's 4 of them and a couple of them. But I just wonder what the proper.
Can you ask? I didn't hear it.
What would be the proper way to handle if I was absent at one of those meetings and couldn't very well say that it was accurate because I wasn't here? Should I just abstain?
Yeah,
We don't normally do that, but I just wondered.
Pull that one and vote on it separately.
Yeah.
Abstain from that one and vote on it.
Except
Okay.
if we vote on it separately, then we won't have quorum.
Well,
So-
it's,
So the one that you weren't at and you don't want to vote on, we wouldn't be able to approve tonight.
I was absent for 3 of them.
and as was I. So I don't know that it matters, but I mean, I read through them, but
We can hold the consent agenda.
Let's do that.
over.
sounds like we need to.
Well, maybe,
Sounds like we need to
maybe
hold
we
the
were all
consent.
at the same one, at least one of them.
So
do you
there
wanna
can
just-
be a motion to hold the consent agenda
Let's
over
just
to the
do
next
that.
meeting and then vote on that.
I make a motion that we hold the consent agenda over until the next meeting.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, we will hold it over until our next meeting. Council liaison announcements. I knew them. Is there any representative?
None present.
Okay, got it. Moving forward. Staff announcements, Brad?
Good evening and thank you. Just a couple here. So the Boards and Commissions Appreciation Dinner was attended by Commissioners Simpson, Cook, Robinson, and Clifford. And Commissioner Simpson provided a report on the Planning Commission. I don't know if you, for those that weren't here, if you wanted to just share a few highlights of that, or you're not. I don't know that it's anything that we haven't discussed before.
Agreed.
In public, but
I believe it was just a recap summary of the staff report that had been presented and expressing my desire that the community be involved in the Sherwood West process as we go through it.
The city has an open planning commission vacancy, and that's been publicized, and the deadline for submitting the application is December 19th. And then we probably be looking to appoint shortly after the first of the year, or going to council for appointment. We have a resolution going to the city council next week to form the community advisory committee and technical advisory committees for the Sherwood West project. And we've also put out a call for people interested in attending or being on the community advisory committee. And I think I copied all of you on the letters that were sent out to all the property owners and everybody within 1,000 feet of the boundaries of the Sherwood West program. It's also been posted on the web and sent out to our interested parties list. And we put something in the Gazette. I think also the Archer articles. So the applications for the Community Advisory Committee are due on December 31st, 2014.
And on the Sherwood West, is it going to have its own page and track?
It has its own page, and it's on that letter. If you look at the letter that was sent out to the property owners, there is at sherwoodoregon.gov/Sherwood West, I think, is the website. So it has its own project page now, and there is some information on there, along with the application to sit on the advisory committee.
And can you join up for an interested parties list for just the Sherwood West?
Yes, you can. And in the back of the room tonight, there's also a sign-in list for people that want to join on to that interested parties list as well.
Okay, so they can do it online or at the public meetings.
Yeah, in the letter it says online, contact myself or Connie, or you can sign up here, or just come to the counter and ask us, and we'll put you on there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. You have 2 upcoming hearings. I just wanted to let you guys know because I don't want to get into any quorum issues, but they're not until January. So the first one is January 9th, is the final development plan for the Cedar Brook PUD. That's the one over off of Meineke and Cedar Brook. And then tentatively scheduled, because they're still working with the adjoining property owner, is the Springs at Sherwood. Are tentatively scheduled to come before you on January 27th.
Does that mean no meeting, the second meeting in December?
That means right now there is no scheduled meeting for December 23rd.
Okay, thank you.
The second date you mentioned was the 27th of January?
The 27th of January.
Okay.
So what is that?
Springs at
It's a Tuesday.
Well, isn't 14 days after the 9th? Isn't that the 23rd?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I have the date wrong? I thought I did the math. I'm sorry.
Maybe it's not a Tuesday.
Smarty Pants.
I have not
You're-
provided public notice yet. So.
I think it's the 23rd unless can't be the
Not really the
31st.
Just to clarify, sorry, I'm looking at my calendar, January 6th and January 20th, I think, is what, or is it the January 13th and 27th?
13th and 27th. I said the
13th.
9th. And that
Oh, okay.
There we go.
messed you up.
1,
So it's the
13.
13th and
The
27th.
9th is a Friday night.
And I know I will not be here on the 13th. I will be out of town.
And that concludes my announcements. Do you guys have any questions?
The Springs.
I do. I know Bob's not here, and I had not enough opportunity to advance notice. I was looking for an update on the Lindley Way and the traffic calming process that was brought before us. I believe staff was going to be putting a process in place so citizens would have an avenue to express concerns and know that there was a procedure for getting traffic issues addressed by the city.
Yeah, and Brad gave me a quick heads up that you might be asking that.
30 seconds ago.
And we are still working on a process, really. We do receive complaints, PD receives complaints, and we evaluate them as best we can and see what we can do. It might be increased enforcement with Lindley Way. I know we put some stop signs up. We've identified some possible other ideas that might help the situation. But there's currently no funding earmarked for neighborhood traffic calming.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that we're talking about possibly through this next budget process, is kind of establishing a program where people can actually, there could be funding allocated for small things or having a process for bigger things. So we are working on it, we're aware of it, but we don't have any great answers right this moment.
Yeah, as long as we're not losing track that it is something that I guess we've heard a couple of times that citizens don't feel there's a beginning to an end.
Right.
We don't know how to get from point A to point B, and there's no good course to follow.
Right.
So okay.
And we are aware of that, and I just want to thank Mr. Bevel for continuing, because it is important for people to continue to bring that up and bring that to our attention. And we get comments through engineering and through PD as well, but I think it's important for people to continue coming to Planning Commission and Council too, to make sure that that stays on the radar. So while we are trying to find a long-term solution.
Well, you know how I am with track changes, so it's on my radar now. So I'm going to try and.
Do you anticipate it being something that has to wait for budgeting? Is that what I heard you say? Because that might be a whole year from now, would it not?
Well, there's no
budget for it, do you
budget
think?
for it.
So, but in terms of setting up a process?
No, that doesn't have to wait. But it's something we have to have the time and to focus on and to do. And we have, we've met internally and had some discussions, but we just don't have a clear path yet.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions for staff? All right, then we will move on to community comments. I'm not sure what order they came in. I kind of shuffled them when I got up here. So Eugene Stewart.
Yes, Eugene Stewart. Only thing I'd like to talk a little bit about today is our traffic that we have going through Sherwood. I don't think our TSP adequately plans for it at this point, let alone the state and the county plans. And as, I don't know, I drive 99W a lot. And it's not just here. You can go just about anywhere in Portland at certain times. I mean, it's almost impossible to get from point A to point B. So I just don't feel that, we talked a little bit about a bypass, and I think we need to put that on the front burner because you're taking 99W and slowing it down every time you put more development out there. All you got to do is look at the mess. This isn't in Sherwood, but the traffic coming down from Bull Mountain. I mean, that backs up 99W sometimes past King City, just for that amount of people coming down. And as you're looking at developing Sherwood West and other areas in the future, traffic keeps adding to it, but we haven't changed anything on there. The only thing I have seen over the years is that I can remember when there was a flashing yellow light on 99W at Six Corners, and then there's only one flashing yellow light in Taggart at Hall Boulevard. And that used to handle it. Well, let me tell you that look at all the traffic lights we've added since then. So you've taken 99W being a major road to becoming clogged. And TriMet doesn't help any. The buses pull over and they're not provided adequate space to get out of the traffic, because then you've got two lanes that got to merge over to one lane just to get around the buses. And all the money we're spending on supposedly mass transit doesn't seem to be helping any. Traffic's still getting worse. And so I don't know, maybe we're spending too much money on mass transit. We need to spend more on developing other ways as people are not moving out of their cars. I could see possibly carpooling helping. But we're not adequately planning, and we have no means of monitoring how the traffic is increasing. We don't take any major intersections and on a monthly or semi-monthly or quarterly basis check what the traffic going through there is so we can see, is it building or isn't it? And I also know that it's the commute time is probably the worst time. The rest of the time, it's not so bad. Mm-hmm. But we do have a problem out there, and part of it is people working away from Sherwood instead in Sherwood. We don't seem to be able to bring businesses into. Example, we just had Two Kills Brewing announce, that they're moving over to Hillsborough because my understanding, they had found some property, but it wasn't zoned right. Why can we not, as a city, assist businesses to help them? Why do we make it so difficult that they take their business and move it someplace else? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's not working. She's got her timer.
If it's not working, would you like to go get the 1 minute red sign or something out of the box?
Thank you. Out of the box.
And Eugene must have an internal timer because he was at about 3 minutes and 45 seconds. So. All right. So without the electronic timer, Kirsten will put up a blue sign when you have 1 minute left and a red sign when your time has expired, both during the public comment and the hearing process. All right. Next is our clause.
Robert James Claus, 22211 Southwest Pacific Highway. Well, I wondered when this would start to happen. As you well know, we've had a big change in the council. We're going to have a big change in direction, if you can believe what they say. But it's interesting, I talked to Secretary of State's office. And I've been amused for some time because some time ago we removed from the charter the ability of a city councilman to talk to a staff person around the city manager. Now, that really shouldn't be done, but if you're going to use undue influence, you have to do it. That's kind of standard mantra. You know, like a cow catches himself, you never catch him. And the first thing you're going to do is change your charter. So you started talking about undue influence. Now let's suppose some things. Let's suppose you got a pattern where somebody that backs particular politicians gets particularly very favorable interpretations. Or a subdivision is having trouble, and one of the politician's relatives lives in the area, and so you go in and shut down the parking and suggest that that politician in a tight election did that. Let's say there was a pattern of that. Let's say there was a pattern of talking to the staff. Let's say there was a pattern of showing up at the meetings when you want something passed. I'm sure you all remember the Doyle hearing. Highly informative hearing. Very imaginative zoning. It would have made Houston blush. But then after all, he was politically active with certain people. Now that brings in the question of prosecutorial discretion. Now that we know we have a city attorney, you want to start thinking about that. Because in this state, one of them can get trouble with the bar, and there has been suggestions about that from outside sources already. And the second one is a felony. It's not just the little problem Christiana Clark faced. It's actually very serious because you're starting to use police powers. Now, let me summarize the problem you face. This all started with Amarillo versus Euclid when the Supreme Court said you could zone property less than its highest best use. It was not a takings if there was a substantial benefit. That substantial benefit, Lucas versus South Carolina, means it doesn't have a negative value. The burden of proof shifts then to the person challenging it, i.e., you are a criminal till you prove what you're doing is wrong. This thing you're seeing in Ferguson is a very real reflection of what you're seeing of this overreaching police powers. And I'm going to tell you the same way with the speech in this town. You've systematically shut that down. Now, an election's been lost. You're going to have changes. And I would suggest, with the abuses I've seen of the prosecutorial discretionary power and with the undue influence, you'd all take a step back and know one thing. If somebody has zoning and somebody does it and it's permitted by the staff, as Joe Gall is pointing out, somebody else should be able to do the same thing. But they're not. And this commission has been as much a part of that aberrant 14th Amendment aberration as any group I've ever seen. Now you've got a chance to straighten it out. And it would suggest, with the Secretary of State saying, we want to look at this matter, you will look at it. Because I'm telling some of us have really, really found this to be amazing. But we'll leave it to your excellent judgment, if that's the case.
All right, thank you. Tim Voorhees?
Tim Voorhees, P.O. Box 908, Sherwood, Oregon, Steel Tech. Reason I'm here tonight is to have a little chat. I want a two-way conversation, if I could, with staff and everybody else in here. I was floored when I took some letters into the post office and saw a public notification posted for code zone wording changes for industrial property. Okay, how long has the staff been working on this?
Chair Simpson, I'm going to, I guess, ask for this. It sounds like this is regarding the code amendment, so I'll.
No, I'm getting up to that. I'm just asking questions, getting to that.
Well, we
We
will be
will,
discussing.
staff will look to the chair and the planning commission on how you wish to deal with questions from the audience. So we're not going to answer unless you direct us to or
Okay,
ask us to.
well, I was just gonna go back to I have notes that when we had the one work session, and I don't know, that was middle of summer, it seems like, but I know that our first public noticed work session was September 9th.
September 9th, okay? You guys been working on it since September 9th. We have maybe 100 industrial pieces of property in town. It would be common courtesy to send an envelope out to every one of us. I made a few phone calls. Only found one person that knew about it, but they have an employee that's job is to keep an eye on you. I had no idea you were going to change it. I remember when I was heavy industrial, all of a sudden I became light industrial. There's something wrong with this picture where there's no public notification to the people that are being affected. Don't you agree, Gene?
Oh, I don't want to get into a debate about whether or not there was public
Well, that's
notice, because
simple
I
question.
believe there was public notice. So I guess I'm just confused about
public
what
notice if you happen to be at the post office, if you happen to be at Albertsons, if you happen to be at Safeway. That's public notice. But common courtesy would be to send out a letter to all of the industrial landowners in this town, which isn't very many. This place would be packed right now if they knew it was going on. None of them knows any of this is going on. None.
So this item, I think, is going to be under one of our agenda items. So if you could listen to the staff report during that time and make your comments after you hear the staff report on that particular item.
No, I'm talking about public notice now.
Okay.
You have to have public notice for things going on.
Right.
Jane, you live in Sherwood, right? What would you do if a pig farm wanted to move in next to you and they allowed it, or they did the changes and stuff, but they didn't notify you? You'd be a little upset. You can't do this to the landowners of Sherwood. You owe us the common courtesy to notify us by letter, not by posting it at the post office, Safeway, Albertsons, and everything else, and try to slip it through the cracks. This is wrong in so many ways. And this is why I'm really glad the council's changed and everything else. Maybe we can get some honor back in this city. Thank you.
Okay. I don't have any other cards for community comments. And I would presume that during the staff comment, they would provide information about the public notices for the different processes that we're going through tonight and in the future.
Like they did on the wall.
Okay.
We can send our legislative.
Okay, we're going to move forward to new business. And I'm going to read the legislative land hearing script. Okay. The Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on PA 1402 Sherwood Zoning and Development Code update. The purpose of this hearing is to provide the public with an opportunity to testify and provide information to the Planning Commission concerning the PA 14-02 Sherwood Zoning and Community Development Code update. The Commission will conduct tonight's hearing in the following order. Staff will present the staff report, followed by questions, if any, by the Planning Commission for staff. We will then open the hearing for public testimony, and each person's time will be limited as followed. applicant, there is no applicant, the applicant's the staff. So they'll have 30 minutes split between presentation, rebuttal, excluding questions from the commission. Persons in favor of the application, 4 minutes each. Persons opposed to the application, 4 minutes each. Rebuttal from the applicant, remainder of 30 minutes. We will then close the public hearing. Final comments by staff, up to 15 minutes. Questions of staff, if any, by the commission. Discussion and deliberation by the commission. If you wish to speak, please fill out one of the blue testimony forms in the back of the room and submit to the recording secretary. The Planning Commission chair will recognize people who wish to speak, and any questions should be addressed through the chair. When you come to the microphone, please state your name and address for the record, as this hearing will be recorded. Please speak clearly into the microphone. During this hearing, the Planning Commission will be making a recommendation to council. We are not the final hearing, and at the City Council, there will be an opportunity for people to provide additional testimony. The Planning Department will now present their staff report.
Who's the applicant?
The city is the applicant, as requested.
I don't understand your order of that way. Who's the applicant? The city?
In this hearing, the city's applicant is a applicant.
The city initiated.
The
the
city
legislative
initiated
amendment.
based on
Okay.
our work sessions.
Okay, thank you. Today I'm going to present case PA 1402, the 2014 code amendments.
Can't hear.
Hello?
Yep.
There you go.
Call closer, sorry about that. This text amendment to the zoning code seeks to do a number of things. First, to correct errors, to increase consistency between sections of the code, to consolidate definitions, to clarify code language, and there are two substantive changes that are proposed. First, substantive changes to Chapter 1631. It is item 10.
You need to be closer.
I have to put this in my mouth almost. Okay.
I can hear you, but it's light.
The first substantive change proposes to remove the conditional use permit requirement for incidental retail sales in the light industrial and general industrial zones. The effect would be to treat light industrial and general industrial zoning property the same as our employment industrial zone property. I'll go into these further in the staff report, but just to explain the changes. The second substantive change is to Chapter 16-120. It is item 44. The proposes to increase the amount of monetary assurance of full and faithful performance to those seeking to subdivide land from 100% to 125% of the estimated cost of improvements. A little bit of background. The Planning Commission has held 3 work sessions. The first was a public work session on April 8th in 2014, where potential code amendments was one of a couple topics at that work session. The second work session was on September 9th, and that is when staff pulled together things heard from the April 8th meeting, as well as other comments that staff has heard from applicants, the public calling in, and just staff's review and working with the code inconsistencies that were there. Those were clarified and prioritized, and at the October 28th work session, we went through the language one more time and got additional edits, proposed edits from the Planning Commission and the city attorney, and direction to move forward and bring those to a public hearing, which brought us to today's hearing. Is it going? All right, so public agency notice and comments. Public notice was posted in 5 locations and online on November 18th, 2014. This is a type 5 application. and that is the requirement for public notice on Type 5 applications. An article was also included in the November-December issue of the Sherwood Archer. Public notice was published in the Times on November 27th and December 4th, and public notice was published in the December 2014 issue of the Sherwood Gazette. Agency notice, the DCLD notice was submitted on November 4th, 2014, and agency notice to surrounding agencies and affected agencies, our standard notification on November 17th. To date, staff has received 2 comments from affected agencies, the State Department of Transportation and the DCLD, simply inquiring if we are going to address the transportation planning rule consistency. And we informed them that we are in our staff report, and that will be brought up later. We have received no public inquiries or public comments on the proposal. Oops. All right, required findings. There are 2 required findings per our code for text amendments. The first is 168030.a. An amendment to the text of the comprehensive plan shall be based upon the need for such an amendment as identified by the council or the commission. Such an amendment shall be consistent with the intent of the comprehensive plan and with all other provisions of the plan and code, and with any applicable state or city statutes and regulations. The second required finding is the transportation planning rule consistency. To review of plan and text amendment applications for effect on transportation facilities, proposals shall be reviewed to determine whether it significantly affects a transportation facility in accordance with OAR 60-12-0060, the TPR. Review is required when a development application includes a proposed amendment to the comprehensive plan or changes the land use regulations. So we'll get in and address those. This proposal seeks to amend chapters of the Zoning and Community Development Code, Volume 3 of the Comprehensive Plan. While the specific proposal does not include changes to the goals or policies, it would amend language of the Zoning and Community Development Code. There are no other standards other than ensuring that that language is consistent with the existing comp plan and applicable rules, as I just read. There is a table in your packet of the proposed text amendments. It is Exhibit A. In there are 52 items that are proposed, and each table item lists the item as well as an explanation for what has been proposed and why. And as I discussed earlier, 2 of those changes are substantive. The remaining proposed amendments are administrative updates intended to correct Scrivener, formatting, and citation errors, to consolidate definitions, provide clarity to the code. For example, in a few instances, the code refers to sections that do not exist or have been renumbered through previous amendments, and we're trying to correct those erroneous citations. Additionally, a prior edit, the publisher inadvertently inserted section 169030, site plan modification and revocation, between section 169020.b and 20.c, and that has caused a lot of confusion when that code section was inserted in the middle of another section. Additionally, where possible, the word shall has been eliminated and code language has been written in a more direct and active voice, as suggested by the city attorney during the October 28th Planning Commission work session and supported by Planning Commission direction at that time. So the first substantive, I was going to go through the substantive. There's a Planning Commission memo that I passed out at the beginning. At the October 28th meeting, I promised that the numbers would stay the same from the October 28th to this one, and it did not, and I want to explain why it did not. First, item number 3 in the October 28th work session was a request to add a definition for diameter at breast height to our definition section 16.10.020. When we went and reviewed that, we found out that we were working off an old version of the definition section and not the most current. And our most current version, which should have been in our code book, and I apologize that it was not, we have addressed this issue prior, and the current code does provide a definition for diameter at breast height. Therefore, staff determined there was no need for that proposed text amendment, as we erroneously brought it forward. as a need. So that was eliminated, and then subsequently everything else was renumbered since that was number 3. The other thing was that there were 2 times when there were items that pertain to the same section of code, and we wanted to consolidate those so that there was just one section of code when we send something to code publishing, that they're not making one change and then another change. We wanted it to be all at one time. So items number 33 and 34 from the October work session were changes to section 1682.020.c.7 and 1682.020.c.9 respectively. And they were consolidated into one item, number 32 on your list, just dealing with that entire section. The second combines 3 of them from the October 28th work session, items 39, 40, and 41, which were changes to sections 1690.20 through 1690.30 was the former number 39. 40 was 1690.30.d8 subsection A5, and 41 was D8 subsection B4. Since those 2 and 40 and 41 dealt with section 1620 and section 1630, we combined them so that all those changes are just seen in one item, item number 37. Nothing was changed, those things were all brought up, and it's all just dealt with in one place. And that last one was particularly problematic because that is the section of code where one section 1690.30 was inserted in the middle of section 1690.20. So we just want to make sure we dealt with all those changes at one place. Are there any questions on those consolidations? The rest of the numbering should all be similar to what you saw previously.
Okay.
There are,
Everybody, we all got that,
So we
right?
all got
All
that.
head nodding that everything's really
Okay.
clear. And I guess I just
Yes.
want to say, before the meeting, I went to staff and said, 39, 40, 41, please just help me clarify that we're really, because you know how I do track changes, I want to make sure that we're totally dot to dot. And if you look at Exhibit B, that is what the clean version is. And when Connie re-explained it to me, it made sense that if we had a change here and then 2 more changes below it, when it goes to publication, once they fix 39, then 40 and 41 are now referencing things that have already been changed. So by doing one change, we have a better chance of getting it all right the first time.
Yep.
So,
that's the goal, getting it right the first time so we're not back again saying, oh, we forgot to change these references. With those, the non-substantive changes, there are 2 edits that were missed that I want to bring to your attention. The first one is with item, let me see, 37 that I just talked about, and it would be found on page 63 in your packet. Under open space provided for public use, under the possible points number 2, there is a 0 that was left off. It should read yes, 500 to 1,000 square feet rather than 5,000 to 1,00. So we will add that extra 0
right here.
when it goes.
Could you repeat that again?
Yeah, where
please?
was that?
It's on
Right
page
here.
63
Okay.
in the table. It's the second to the last column, open
Open
space
space.
provided for public use. And then it's the middle
Okay.
column under possible points 2. There's a typo just on the number. It should be 1,000.
Got it.
The second one is on item number 39, which falls on page 56. And there should be a period at the end of that footnote number 3. There is currently not one.
Did you find those?
What?
Did you find those?
Yes. How did you know?
If there are no other edits or changes, I'm going to move on to our 2 substantive issues and talk about those more.
Yes, please.
Okay, so the first one was item 10, section 163120 is the use table for our industrial zones. Currently, incidental retail sales or display showrooms directly associated with the permitted use, limited to a maximum of 10% of the total floor area of the business, is a conditional use item in the LI and GI
You're on hold for
zones.
just a second.
Sorry, we were tracking down the missing period. We have it now.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, so back to item 10.
Thank you,
Which is our
sorry.
first substantive change. And it deals with our industrial zoned properties. Currently, all properties zoned light industrial and general industrial require a conditional use permit if they want to do incidental retail sales or a display showroom directly associated with a permitted use and limited to a maximum of 10% of the total floor area of the business. The current proposal is proposing to change that to a permitted use and to eliminate the requirement for a conditional use permit and to treat the properties that are zoned light industrial and general industrial the same as we treat our employment industrial zone properties, that they're all treated equally. There is a footnote on that, and that is that it's limited in size to 5,000 square feet in a single outlet and no more than 20,000 square feet in multiple outlets in the same development. So that currently is the restriction, whether it's permitted or conditionally permitted depending on the zone. So it would still retain that restriction. This is consistent with Metro's Urban Growth Management Functional Plan, Section 307-430, which allows for some incidental retail as long as it is restricted in the manner that we currently have restricted in our code.
So 10% of 50,000, that's where the 5,000 comes from.
Yes.
If they have 50,000 in a single outlet, no more than 5, and then if they have multiple outlets that total up to 200,000, then we're looking at 20,000.
Correct.
Or
But it would also limit if you had a 10,000 square foot building or a 100,000, you couldn't do 10,000 worth of that. It would restrict you to 5% or 5,000 square feet, whichever is 10%, or 5,000 square feet, whichever is more.
But unlike it was before, it would be outright permitted.
Yes, it would not require a conditional use permit.
So I have a question. I thought I had read someplace that this is, this chart that we're using currently was revised in the last 3 to 5 years.
Yes.
And prior to the chart system, there was a narrative only. And in the narrative only version of our code, weren't retail sales permitted.
Yes.
And we lost that. Are you
I was just going to say that. So
okay, sorry.
That's perfect. That leads right into what I was going to say.
We lost it, and now we're getting
that
it back.
Prior to 2012, incidental sales limited to 10% of the floor area of a business was permitted in the LI and GI zones, and a text amendment in 2012 removed that, requiring the conditional use permit. So we're really putting back that provision that was in the code prior to 2012 and restoring those rights that those properties had in 2012.
Okay.
With respect to the transportation planning rule, the city engineering department did take a look at that and determined that we're not increasing the amount of incidental retail sales because it's currently permitted. We're just changing the way it's permitted from conditional use to a permitted use. And it would not significantly impact transportation facilities. And that was their determination. And there's an attachment, Exhibit B, in your packet that shows that email from our city attorney.
Okay.
The second item that is a substantial change is item 44. It's section 16-134-040A. And this is in our subdivision section, and it deals with the performance security, talking about a performance bond. Basically, the amount that we would recover, instead of 100%, it would move to 125%. And the reason for this is it is very rare that the city has to pull the performance bond, but in the instance that it does, there are administrative costs associated with pulling that bond and administering that is not recovered by that. So when a developer does not do what they said and had to do that, there's an additional burden to the city and to the taxpayers that isn't recovered, so we are trying to recover that. A previous amendment did amend a different section of code, which was section 16-108-020D2, which also deals with performance bonds. And in that section of code, it already is 125. So it's also cleaning up to make sure we're consistent on every time that we deal with performance bonds in the code, that we're asking for the same amount of bonding.
Madam Chair, if I may, there are other additional considerations as well. For example, if it's a public improvement, The city will have to pay prevailing wage. The city will have to go through a public contracting process. The cost for the city for the same improvement is going to be higher, which is another justification for why this went to 125.
Okay, thank you.
So the 2 points I just talked about came up on the slide for everyone. Staff's recommendation is that based on the findings of fact in the staff report and presented at the hearing and the conclusion of law based on the application criteria, staff recommends the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval of PA 1402 to the City Council. And I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, just from my perspective and where this came from for me, and I heard the citizens' concerns earlier about not having enough public notice of this process. And in April, and I didn't remember when it was obviously earlier than the summer, we had an open house where each of the commissioners were sitting at tables. And this was not the most exciting topic. Medical marijuana was the most exciting topic at my table and Old Town. People at my table wanted us to simplify the Old Town application process. There were comments made at that public process about how we needed to improve the code. A lot of those were substantive changes where they wanted us to improve a process, change a process, or do something different. In addition, staff recognizes that there are Scrivener errors and just references. And so they brought us at that first meeting in September 79 things to look at. And as a commission, we said that's a lot. And it's too much for any one citizen to look at everything and this go to public hearing as one process. And so we split the process into 3 big chunks. The first chunk was for us to address Scrivener errors and inconsistencies within the code that were causing trouble with staff. If it references a code and that code doesn't even exist, now we're trying to explain to applicants when they come forward to the counter upstairs, what we really meant. So the first of 3 groups of changes that we're recommending in the code are whatever that ended up being, 52 Scrivener errors is what I'm looking at, and small changes with the exception of the 2 substantive changes that were just really dealt with by the staff. There are more changes that we are looking forward in the code. We have heard repeatedly that the Old Town process for getting an application through should be revisited so that the right thing can be done more easily. But that is too much to take into under this hearing when we're doing 52 other little tiny minor changes. So when you see us next time for code changes, you will see things that will be substantive changes. And I expect that there will be more people here at these hearings. And we have done everything that we can. I think staff did above and beyond putting notices in the Gazette twice that we were trying to make amendments to the code. And so I thank them. I think they've heard the commission during this process did ask for it to be publicized as much as possible. It's just not as exciting as medical marijuana and the other things that we were discussing at that first hearing. So again, as a commissioner, I think we tried to do what we could to bring to light that we're going through this process. We're doing a code cleanup, and the first stab at this are simple cleanups. And so with that, I know Brad wants to make comments, so go ahead.
I just wanted to respond to Mr. Voorhees' comments about every individual property owner should get notice.
Not every individual.
Well, every individual industrial property owner, because you're an industrial property owner and there are industrial properties affected by this. However, none of the uses allowed currently are changed or further restricted. In fact, the restrictions are less. So there was no requirement to provide a ballot measure 56 notice, which would have required a notice to each individual property owner. So that's why you did not get individual notice that there were changes going to through the code. And again, because they were minor Scrivener's errors and errors intended to make the code more consistent, to remove code sections that were referenced that are no longer in the code, they didn't go out as individual property owners. To individual property owners. When we get into the next phase, when and if that happens, and we get into more policy-related decisions where it actually affects your ability to do things on your property, then we will be required to provide individual ballot measures 56 notice to the property owners. That goes to a great cost to the city and to the taxpayers. It is required, and we do it, but we do provide notice in accordance with state law, and here in Sherwood, over and above what's required of state law. So I would argue that we do provide adequate notice for these. And there have been several instances where the work sessions, the public had an opportunity to watch them on TV. They've had an opportunity to be here. Some of the people that are here tonight have been at some of those work sessions. So that's my point.
Any more questions of staff by commission or comments on the process itself?
Not on the process.
Okay, questions?
About this?
Yes.
The change that we're making to increase the bond insurance to 125%. So you mentioned that was already someplace else in the code. So that amount was arrived at an earlier time. Has it been that way for a while? It just seems like 25%. I know Chris talked about that a public improvement, if the city has to go in and finish that project, it's going to cost us more money than might a developer. I kind of get that. I was just thinking that 25%, it sounds steep. A fourth of the cost of the project, it sounds pretty expensive, but I don't know how expensive cement is. I don't know how expensive
I would say
asphalt
is that
standard?
That's a standard. That's a standard. It's a common practice in other jurisdictions, not specific to Sherwood. One of the things that you have to remember is when a permit is issued, somebody might be working on that project for a couple years. Cost of materials go up, cost of the work. Again, if it's a government actually doing it, then you have to pay prevailing wages. So the actual cost of us having to do the improvement can be significantly more than, say, a private developer doing the improvement. And so in addition to the administrative costs of pooling and administering that bond, you have those costs associated. So it's intended to capture those additional costs.
And I just want to make clear it's not, we just didn't arrive at 125. It was already in the code someplace else. We're just matching it up so we're consistent. Okay.
It also helps make it more consistent across the metro area. So Sherwood is like other jurisdictions. So developers who build in multiple jurisdictions will face similar regulations in multiple places. So to the extent certainty and uniformity is a benefit, it provides that benefit as well.
And we have heard that from developers before, that they appreciate consistency, not inconsistency.
All right.
I have more.
Oh, great.
Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely.
What on page 47, 2B, far right column, what does it mean? All that red code is blocked up, but what does it mean by reserved? It just says reserved in green.
It just means that there will not be a section 1650.010A rather than renumbering all of the code. It just holds that spot open is all it did.
You're not going to sneak any code in there, right? Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
If code were put in there, it would not be snuck in. It would be at the direction of the city council.
I get it. So it's not, I just thought maybe it was
Intentionally
reserved.
left blank.
Yes.
Got it. I
That's
totally
what-
understand. That makes sense to me. Let's see. I think I had one more. Oh, yes, I do. Anybody else have a question besides me?
I do, but I
Okay.
let other people go so I get to be
So
questions.
16G, page 51. This is hedges. And maybe John knows if this is correct or not, but the word trained, a line of closely spaced vegetation specifically planted and trained. Is that right? Trained instead of maintained, or?
Yeah, training is primarily how you create whether it's
Yes.
Is that the correct term? Train?
training would be identified as that, sure. I
Yes.
mean, there are some other words you can use, but I think that would be primarily an acceptable
Okay.
definition.
He's the expert.
Yeah.
I now know that my hedges are not very trained, if that's a term.
If
And
it helps, Commissioner Griffin,
Yes.
it also is, that's not new language that's being proposed. It's currently the language that's in section 1658 20.b.
Using
And
that same
we're
word.
consolidating it instead of having definitions in multiple places in our code, pulling it and moving it into the definition
Got it.
section. So we're just moving it from that section and making sure it's in our definitions section.
And that is all I had. Oh, I do have a question about the point system when we get there. Are we there?
We are there. You are.
Is that okay?
Yes, you're driving the.
All right, so over on, this is page 61, 62, 63, the point system.
And this is what they did is they took the language that's
Right,
in red,
all the
striped
red.
it, and then put it into a chart.
It's way easier to understand.
Oh yes,
It's very easy.
I tried to dot that, and it was mind-numbing, wasn't it?
Oh, it's very nicely done. Okay, so here's my question. So in that first section, for example, this is commercial design review matrix. That's the whole thing, right? And the first section is, building design. 21 points possible, minimum 12 points required. So does this system, I mean, I guess it's the same system we had before, but does this system allow, for example, someone to go, gee, glass is really expensive right now. I'm going to go 0 points on glazing and increase somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And then do we lose the benefit of, now we have like no windows on that side of the building? Mm-hmm. Is that what we want?
What you have in front of you does not change the current system.
That's our current system.
That is the current system. All it does is make it from being inline text where you have to hunt and peck to figure out what
Right.
it says to put it in
But you
a
understand
table
what I'm
format that you
getting
can.
at. Same
But
thing
if you
with
wanted to do that, you could do it.
miscellaneous over on page 63. If someone said, well, I just don't feel like screening any of my roof equipment, so I'll take 0 points on that, and then suddenly we have a building with no screen around the stuff on top
So we
of
would
the
have
roof.
to do that at a different meeting
So
than
you
tonight.
might remember this actually came up
Yeah.
with the industrial site behind Walmart where they weren't meeting all the standards.
Right.
So there is an option that if they don't meet the standards, that they come to you
Right, and that's what they did.
and request the
Architectural
those
review.
points. But if they choose to go through a specific, like I just want to come through and get my approvals, they have to meet the certain number of points. So there are options for them to actually come to you and seek your attention to that specific issue. And you could very well say, well, no, we want to see glazing on that side. And that's what you did.
That's
And
what we
that
did.
industrial- You did
Right,
that,
so that's what I
and then
was remembering that very specific example because I take that route behind Walmart every day. And I was thinking, what would those buildings be like if they didn't have any windows on that side? And I thought, does this make that possible?
It does, and that's how the code is currently written.
It doesn't change the.
It doesn't change the code. So
Nope.
I don't know why that's suddenly.
If you want to make a
Because the
substantive
table
change,
is so clear.
If
Because
it's
That's
easier
gotta
to
be
read now
it.
And you want to do that, then that would
It
be
was
a substantive
perfectly
change.
clear. I just call it bottoming out.
So would that
where a
be something we
developer
talk
says,
about
"Oh,
in
I'm
the
not
next
gonna-"
section of the review?
So now that it's easier to read and you might be able to understand the implications of what the current code is, that would be something to bring up at the future, that we need to take a look at this, and is this adequate for our community? Does it represent what we want to see in development and propose changes? Staff did not propose any changes,
Right,
nor we
right.
proposed to make it easier for everybody to understand
Oh,
what we're
Okay.
actually requiring.
Yes, I think exactly what you did because it's crystal clear to me now how the point system works. I mean, I thought I got it before, and when they came in and we went through the process, I thought, oh, that worked out really well. I thought, and then for some reason, it just really in this matrix, which is really easy to understand, it made it very, very apparent. So, and that's not this conversation; that's another conversation.
Right.
But I just wanted to clarify that I understood that right. That's all I have. That's all the questions I had.
Okay, may I ask one question on page 66? There's a section on F, time limits. And I don't know, because all these have expired, is it time to remove the time limits since they've all expired? Or just put it on the list for the next code update?
Is that the editor's note stuff?
Time limits for site plans approved on or after during 2007 to 2009. The approval is
Right.
extended to 2013. Now that it's 2014,
Right.
We left the code written in the active voice as it is. Certainly, it's no longer needed. There could be a case to leave the historical reference in there if people were curious about having that, and we could change it instead of saying are extended. We could do was extended,
Was.
but if we did say was, it would be the only time in code we're using a past tense. So it's clearly at your discretion on what you
I
want to
see.
do. Staff's intent was to keep the code the way it is and not make changes to the code, but just capture what's there.
Oh, I actually had a question about that very same sentence. Approval are extended. Approval is extended. It doesn't. It seems it reads kind of funny anyway. So
Yeah.
I circled
Should
both
be
of those.
the approvals are.
Approvals are.
You're bringing out my inner copy editor. The first problem is you've got plural at the beginning of the sentence, site plan approvals,
Right.
plural, followed by singular in the second part of the sentence, the approval, singular. It should say a site plan approval granted on or after January 1, 2007 through December 31, 2009. It is extended until December 31, 2013, period.
And if that's the direction the commission wants, we can certainly make that change.
That's again just a type Scrivener thing.
I like that.
That's fine.
So it is a recommendation to council, so you can recommend it as is or recommend it with modifications.
I bet we recommend it with the modifications that.
I do too. I think
City
it
attorney.
reads better. I circled those words,
and
those
leaving
exact
it
words.
if that matches the same voice the rest of the document has. That makes sense.
I concur. So we got, John, are you nodding? Yes. So everybody's in agreement that we'll make that change on page 66.
Gene, can I throw another one in
Essentially a
there?
Scrivener
No.
one. No.
No.
No, I mean another question.
Yes.
This is in the
She meant
paragraphs below under 16.90.030. On 2, we do 10, open close parenthesis %, and then after that we don't use the same. Is that because we defined it originally and now we don't have to put the parentheses around it later? See how it's different? It's different in 3, different in 5, different in 6. I know that's a teeny thing, but I don't know if it's.
My recommendation would be that we treat it the same and spell it out and do parentheses or get rid of the spelling
Just
it
do it
out.
all the same.
Yeah.
It's just a
Usually
Scrivener,
when we
Yeah,
have
'cause
just like the
numbers,
rest
we
of
spell
it.
it out and put in parentheses the
Then
number.
can we just
We make
Spell
those
it out.
all the way
changes.
down?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Spell it all out and put it in.
So I found that we've got it in number 3
These guys
and
are
number
good.
6.
It's also
And
at the
number
end of
5.
5. End of 5.
I will make note of that.
And I have another one. Sorry, I had a lull at work this week, so I really went through this. Number 5 or number C on the next page, 67. What exactly would be the equivalent acknowledgments from CWS as opposed to having an actual letter? Is that like an email? Can it be an email or?
It is an official email or letter from them.
So it
Yeah.
could be an email, and that could be official enough. It doesn't actually have to be a printed, sent through the mail.
Correct.
Okay, that's it. Now I'm really done.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions for staff? All right, then I have 3 cards. Eugene? Oh, there you are.
Eugene Stewart, PO Box 534.
Makes sense.
It was confusing. Brad's explanation helps a little bit, but still, I always was under the impression that any change to the text of the plan, you have to notify the people affected. And on your notice, it says it affects the whole city. Yes, it costs a lot of money to send notices out, but I don't know. It just seems like there should have been a notice, or is this the step we should have taken? And I also question how we keep saying we meet goal 1 when, I don't know, maybe I'm reading it wrong, but it seems like the commission needs to sit down and have a session on this open to the public on what the citizens' plan for involvement is. Brad and I kind of disagree, but what he points to, it's not even close to what you're doing. So why do we keep ignoring what the citizens involvement plan is? You got to have it written down someplace. Let's pull it up and look at it. And are we doing it? We just seem to keep pushing it down the stream. And I keep sensing you don't understand why public doesn't get involved. Well, they don't get involved because of the way you do it. I mean, just like you give a person 4 minutes where they could, on some planning thing, even this one, could prepare maybe an outline of 20 pages. You give that, but most likely you'll just glance at it and push it aside. And you only give a person 4 minutes to present their testimony. Either you need to take their opinions into the process before you have your formal hearing, and when you have a work session, perhaps you should open it up to the general public to make comments during that work session. And I'm confused because that work session, actually, you're making your decision. I always thought you weren't supposed to make a decision until tonight when you have a public hearing. So you're meeting with other people to formulate a decision when my understanding has always been is it's supposed to be at the hearing. You're not supposed to talk to people before and all that, but yet how is the public talk to the Planning Commission in 4 minutes? It doesn't work. You need to either expand the time, especially if they have some very good thought out thoughts to present to you, and they need to get a feedback from the Planning Commission on what your thoughts are. Otherwise, it's like butting your head against a brick wall coming and talking to you. You also have a hearing in one of the busiest seasons of the year, just before Christmas, and you wonder why people don't show up. Perhaps you should try to avoid December when you can and go afterwards. But Goal 1 also says that you're supposed to have a committee for citizens' involvement. I'd like to see the minutes of those meetings. They're supposed to be held once a year. I don't think there's been a meeting held for that, and it's required by state law, for 40 years. So I think you need to start looking at your citizen involvement, and you would get more participation. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next, Tim Voorhees.
Tim Voorhees, P.O. Box 908, Steel Tech Industries, Sherwood, Oregon. It was interesting that Connie said that 2 public agencies commented and no citizens. I take that as a fact that there was no public notification on it because the people I talked to were very concerned about what was going on with it. But they said, the city's going to do what it's going to do and our voice doesn't matter. Okay, I remember a conversation I had with one of the city staff that says, Tim, you just don't understand the public process. All decisions are made prior to any public meeting. True statement. If you don't like it, move your shop out of town. That was under a previous mayor's regime. Yes, you met the bare minimums for the public notifications. We fought hard to get the 1,000-foot notification in for zoning changes and annex changes and everything else, and that's why I fought against Brockman. I wasn't notified. I was within the 1,000 feet. Staff came back, we followed state rules because that piece of property's not in the city limits yet. So they didn't notify out to 1,000 feet. Do I trust this city? No. I do not trust this city one bit. They have problems. Now, going into, I know this is part of the code process and everything else. I don't know if this is a proper place to mention it, but you're going to have a devil of a time passing any more housing to be annexed into this city from what I've heard around town. We don't want to get bigger. So are we annexing in Sherwood West to keep work ahead of staff, to keep the cash flow coming in? Why are we spending this money ahead of getting it annexed in? Let's get it annexed in and then do the planning and not waste the money planning for something that probably will never get voted in to the city. Something to think about. It's no surprise that more people are not here, because it is like hitting your head against the wall. It's just like when the Planning Commission, you did a great job on the cannery site. You listened to us, and the council threw you guys under the bus. Back to that one comment. All decisions are made prior to any public meetings. Is it the staff leading you guys down the path that they want to travel? I don't know. I don't trust them. Have a good evening.
Thank you. R.J. Claus?
Robert James Claus, 22211 Southwest Pacific Highway. I don't come here for any specific reason other than comic relief. Your remark about the most exciting thing was marijuana in a transactional psychological way said a lot more than I would have wanted to say. I mean, good Lord. You're getting an unobtrusive, non-reactive measure from the citizens, and you just don't get it. The annexation went down the first time. The second time it got stomped. Mays, a sitting mayor that couldn't be beaten, got stomped. Your elected got stomped. And you still don't think anything is wrong. Your process is fine. It's your process stinks. You don't know what the word procedural due process means. Now, of course, Mr. Green knows far more about it than I do. That's why the House Judiciary Committee and several commissioners asked him to come and testify about it. You have no procedural due process in this town, period. You make a decision to put in a pipeline, bring in 1,000 acres, put in a junk apartment, and it's all done behind the scenes, and you come here and a councilman gets up and bald-faced lies to this group, it's not Walmart, and you don't do anything about it. Now we're supposed to sit here and talk about this code. I will tell you, I'm the only person in this room that's ever had the U.S. Supreme Court talk about a code they wrote. And I got very favorable remarks. I couldn't sit down with the staff if I wanted to. They're too arrogant. This man, just before we got billboards in this town, told me we didn't need any help on our sign code. Of course we didn't. That's how we got the billboards. It was unconstitutional on its face. You're not understanding anything, and it doesn't make anything that is said to you makes any difference. You're going to go on with a staff that is driven for fees, driven for money because we don't have enough money to pay them. You're going to go on with a city council who thinks they can keep stealing from the landowners every time they turn around and paying for something that we don't want. That was a generous offer we made so the city could work. It wasn't for some fool to come along and steal it. And then look at what you did with Langer. You went back to 1995 and said, develop. And then you sit and seriously talk about these design standards. There ain't any design standards over there. You people didn't even ask them to put in their grade A environmental scented building. You just don't get it. Why people aren't here is what difference does it make? Crean will tell you whatever you do is fine, pick his paycheck up and move back downtown. And we'll all get screwed, and you just don't get it. Check yourself before you wreck us. That's what you're doing. You're wrecking us step by step. I don't care about medical marijuana, quite frankly. I think it's pretty exciting to talk about a police power that can put somebody in prison because some fool decides to write it with no proof and turn it over to people who've got less experience in administrating it. Now, why don't you continue this for 2 weeks? And then maybe we can get a new council, and if we can't, we can get a new planning commission. Because this is embarrassing, just embarrassing. This thing over here, 3/4 of a parking space, 50 units to the acre. It takes some idiot that wanted to turn this to downtown Portland. Oh, I forgot. Even our city clerk doesn't live here anymore. She saw the train wreck coming. You guys are creating train wreck, and every time we ask you to do something, we get exciting. Oh, Lord, that's just pathetic.
All right, I have no more blue cards. If staff would like to take a 3-minute break to prepare rebuttal comments, I would like to take a 3-minute break. Thank you. All right. Okay, we are returned from recess.
25, married.
And staff, if you would provide any comments regarding the issues raised by the citizens testifying, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Sure.
Or use your rebuttal time since you are apt.
A couple
Oh, wait,
things.
let me do it officially because there's no one else in favor or against. So then, okay, so now we're officially rebuttaling.
So it is a legislative process as opposed to a quasi-judicial process. So the idea of leaving the record open is at your discretion. You're not obliged to do that. I would just note that this is a matter that will go before the next council in January as opposed to the council that's sitting now for those that are concerned about it. Again, there are not any substantive changes that I would be concerned about. Obviously, there are folks that are concerned about everything we do, and they're right. They're allowed to do that. And I guess with that, I didn't hear anything in there substantive to the proposed amendments that I can respond to.
Okay, so
And if I can, just chime in, because I don't think I talked to Brad about this earlier today. It's my understanding that originally we were thinking about trying to do this on the January 6th meeting, but that's generally the first meeting where the new council is sworn in, the mayor's sworn in. So it's my understanding that the mayor's asked that to be moved to the January 20th meeting. So if you do forward a recommendation, that would be the meeting that you're forwarding it to.
So I also, the only comment that I heard specifically addressing the amendments that are before us or the code updates that are for us had to do with concern regarding notification. And as it was testified both by the person that expressed the concern and staff, we have more than met the minimum requirements for notification. We've put it in all the places, and we've had many opportunities for work sessions and people to see and read about it. So what is the commission's desire regarding this PA 1402?
I don't think it needs to be left open any longer. We've kind of beat it to death. We've been working on this. We'd have to start all over again the next time, and these are nothing substantive enough for this chunk of, like you mentioned, it's divided into sections, and I think that there'll be a lot more work coming forward to us with stuff that makes a lot more sense, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I've tried to attend most of the meetings, the work sessions, as well as the plan commission meetings, and we have definitely spent some time going through this line by line, and I think we've pretty well clarified most of the, or all of the terminology. And,
It's exhaustive at this point,
Yeah,
I think. Maybe just a period or two missed, maybe. That you can
No.
still find.
One
Before
period.
council, you can come before the council and show them where there's missing a period.
Okay.
So I guess I would move this, that the Sherwood Planning Commission approve the application for PA 1402.
I'm sorry,
Sherwood-
Commissioner. I think that you need to close the public hearing.
Do we?
Oh,
Go.
my apologies. Based on that, I will close the public hearing. Thank you.
So now I may, okay. So I guess I would move that the Sherwood Planning Commission approve the application for PA 1402
We have to recommend approval.
with the, approve the applicant, I'm sorry?
We have to approve recommendations. Also.
Oh. Which one did you give me? The wrong one? This one? Forward a recommendation of approval to the, I would move that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for PA 1402, Sherwood Zoning and Community Development Code Update, based on the applicant's testimony, public testimony received, and analysis, findings, and conditions in the staff report.
With the
With-
proposed modifications.
With the proposed modifications,
Right.
minor modifications that we discussed this evening.
Second?
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we recommend approval to the City Council on PA 14-02. Are there any further comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. All right. Planning Commissioner announcements. Are there any announcements? Any plays coming up that we should be attending? No.
We just have Sally's position open. Is that the one that we have open? Didn't you say there was
Yes.
something
Yeah,
else?
so Commissioner Robinson's position is open. And then in March, Commissioner Clifford's position will be open. So hoping that you will resubmit your application.
Thought we had one additional one. No? Okay.
Nope.
Good.
And it was December 19th, that was the deadline for that, for Sally's seat, right?
For Commissioner Robinson's.
Right.
And, and I think we'll talk to the mayor and Commissioner Simpson about, whenever we get applications in, because they were so close together, we may not go out again necessarily. We'll probably go out for a shorter amount of time because we'll have a group of people already in. So,
You mean if March should come around, you mean?
yeah, when March comes around.
Oh, okay. So do we have some applicants from the last, because it hasn't been very long since the last one, frankly. Did we?
So far, I don't believe we've received any applications for Commissioner Robinson's seat. I have talked to somebody that might be interested in the audience that might, but I'm encouraging anybody to put
Okay.
in, especially if you feel disenfranchised by this process or the city process, by all means, get involved. And I'm not saying that you're not involved, but get involved where you're actually up here making decisions.
And Brad, I think that Commissioner Walker was asking because I think it was Commissioner Robinson that was most recently actually appointed, and that was fairly recently.
I thought it was.
There might have been some good candidates that weren't selected, and so maybe we'll look at.
There was only
that-
one other applicant.
Oh,
at
was
that
there
time.
only one other?
There was only one other,
applicant?
and
Okay.
I mean, it's been our past practice to call them and ask if they're still interested.
You would, okay. I think that would be a good idea to let that person know that there's an opening again, in case they aren't aware.
All right. If nothing left to announce, hearing no objections, we'll adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
All right, meeting adjourned.